evening, everyone, and welcome in. We are live from the Andrew Downs AKC Marketing Studios. I'm Andrew Barber, Drew Shipley, and we have the man himself, Andrew Downs, joining us. Welcome into the show, Andrew. Glad to have you on.
What's up, guys? That's thank you for having me. That's the first time I've seen that or heard that. So that's awesome. I'm glad to be here and glad I could add another Andrew to the show.
Yeah, as if we didn't have enough, Andrew,
Right. You guys can call me Andy.
Yeah,
Should I change my name down here to Andy just so it's less confusing?
Oh, man. I've always had a hard time with people like teachers when I was growing up calling me Andy. My response to that always was that I didn't want to be the toy from Toy Story. Like, I didn't want to be like a kid. Like, I felt Drew was more like a mature name. I don't know why, but I just rolled with it. It's worked out thus far.
People in my life who call me Drew. One of my brothers does, and a handful of other people. Nobody really calls me Andy, but I've always tried to go by Andrew.
All right. Hey, Andrew, I just wanted to start it off this evening. What do you miss most about KXNO, and what do you not necessarily miss about KXNO in this transition to AKC marketing?
Yeah, well, I mean, what I miss most is easy. It's the people. Doing the Murph and Andy show every day. How many people in your life do you sit and talk to for 2 hours every day? Like, I mean, even your spouses and your kids, you have trouble making that amount of time and on an everyday basis. And we had that time set aside. We obviously talked about all the things on the air that whatever was happening in sports or pop culture or in Des Moines or whatever. But then we would have, 10 or 15 minutes, an hour during the breaks where we talk about other things in our lives and our jobs and our stresses and things like that. And so, and then not just with those guys, but, KXNO is different than like a radio station you may think of if you have never been to one and you think of like in a movie setting or something where, everybody's kind of sitting around in one bank of cubicles and giving each other crap and talking all day. Most of the people on KXNO have other jobs and other things to do. And so there's not a whole lot of that, but there was that with like Sean Roberts, Heather Burnside, and myself, who were all there full time and all kind of had our desks right next to each other. And so, I miss that aspect of it. I miss the kind of hanging out with my friends every day and talking about sports part of it. I don't miss a lot of the corporate media part of it. I don't miss being on call 24/7. I don't miss the, scheduling part-timers for Iowa Wild games 72 nights a year and that sort of a thing. And then honestly, the thing I didn't think about is I don't miss having to have a take on everything. I've been able to, and I still do. I do podcasts for Hawkeye Nation, and I still try to look at especially Iowa sports from as objective as a view as I can. But there were things that came up, during the basketball season, or just really like any little controversy that comes up, anything that goes big on social media that I just don't want to engage with. I just don't have to engage with. Whereas before, I always felt like I needed to kind of be in the know, at the very least have a cursory knowledge of just about everything that was happening. And then at times, form opinions on things that maybe I didn't have a strong opinion about, but you have to have some kind of a take when you're going to be on the radio and talking about it. And so that's been a really nice thing, is to just kind of, I see something that kind of annoys me, I just don't pay attention to it. And if I don't have a strong opinion about something, I just don't have to form a strong opinion. And that part has been unexpectedly cool.
That's awesome. We brought you on for some opinions tonight, so I hope you're prepared.
Absolutely.
Strictly
That's
Iowa.
I don't have that daily like outlet. So like I've been talking more sports to my wife than ever before. It's like things like that where it's because I do have all, there are things I do have opinions on. There are issues I do want to engage with. And, sometimes the people I work with aren't as engaged as I am, or they're busy doing their jobs and their job isn't sports. And so, so having opportunities like this is always really fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. We'll give your wife a break and let you talk sports with us tonight. So
she appreciates it.
Yeah. So Andrew, we asked this question of David Eichholt, and we want to ask you too. What's your favorite Iowa Hawkeye sports memory? Just anyone that comes to your mind. What's just your favorite one all the time you've been covering, talking about Iowa? What's your favorite memory or moment?
So it's too recent to say all this Caitlin Clark stuff. Although I think as we move further away from it, that will, this last run to the Final Four and all of that, some of those moments will end up being some of my favorite moments. I was at the Capital One Bowl when Take the Holloway happened. I was there with my dad and two of my brothers. So being in the stadium to experience that, that's got to be number one, I'm sure. But the very first time I covered a game in Kinnick Stadium, and I didn't do a whole lot of that, KXNO, we don't cover games on that level really. But when I first started, I did want to kind of get my feet wet, meet media members, things like that. And so the very first game I covered inside Kinnick Stadium, you take this elevator up to the press box. And no joke, the first thing I saw when the elevator door opened was Hayden Fry walking past. And it was just one of those, like, as a kid who grew up a Hawkeye fan, who never imagined he would, I went to Iowa, never imagined I'd ever meet any of these people or be in a situation to cover a game. And I walk into that press box, I'm already feeling like nervous and anxious and like maybe I shouldn't be here. And the very first thing I see is, the legend of Hayden Fry. And so that those are definitely up there. But yeah, being at that Capital One Bowl game, that was pretty amazing.
That's my favorite too, Andrew. I mean, that's up there.
Were you there?
I was not there. No, in fact, I believe I was still at my basic training for the Army because I'm that old now. I've hit 21 years of service, so we're time flies when you're having fun, I guess.
Right, exactly. Thank you for your service, by the way.
I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I'm going to date myself. I was 17 years old at the time of the Capital One Bowl, so I was just barely learning how to drive, just got my license, just figured all that out. Not even old enough to vote yet. So
I was so mad that LSU had come all the way back because Iowa had the game in hand, it felt like, and then they came all the way back. Jamarcus Russell would, play, and they scored with a minute left, less than a minute left. And I was so upset I wanted to leave. And I said to my dad and my brothers, like, let's go. I don't need to be here to watch Nick Saban celebrate this. And had I been there by myself or with people who were less gung-ho about staying, I'm afraid I would have missed that moment. I would have been in the parking lot when I heard the cheers go up. So thankfully my dad and my brothers didn't let me leave. So I could actually, say I saw it and I actually did see it.
Everybody that I was watching that game with, like we were down in our family friend's basement and I was the only one who stayed to watch the end. And I start freaking out and going nuts and everybody upstairs thinks I'm playing a practical joke on them. Like I literally had to beg people to come downstairs to watch the replay to tell them that
awesome.
I was telling the truth that I had actually won. So yeah, good memories for sure. So it's fun to share that with you. All right, Drew, we'll kick it back over to you, man.
Yeah, AD, we're kind of curious as to what your new role is at AKC. I mean, it's a marketing company, right? But what do you do on the day-to-day? And it seems like kind of the relationships that you had talked about building at KXNO maybe helped you in this new role as well as far as gaining new clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Designing stuff for them and whatnot. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so a cool thing about AKC is that my computer that keeps going? I'm sorry about that if it is.
I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out if it's mine.
Probably is. I don't know. Anyway, so if you guys just can't hear me at some point, just wave or something like that. No, so AKC, it's a local employee-owned marketing firm in Johnston. It's kind of a unique situation. There's essentially like 4 divisions. There's the marketing division, which is what you would expect it to be. A lot of ag marketing, a lot of local companies, social media marketing, all that kind of stuff. Everything you think of when you think of marketing agency. We have a video production group called REL Productions, and they do professional quality video. We have a website development and kind of back end web company called D Webware. And then the 4th division is where I'm mostly parked, and that's in the merchandise space. And so for a long time, it's been servicing the merchandise needs of like our existing marketing clients. So again, some of these big ag companies, when they need employee gear or apparel or awards or gifts for their employees or promotional items or signage or whatever that is. And so what I've kind of been tasked to do, what my job is to, bring those new clients in and kind of expand on our merchandise capabilities and the type of companies that we work with. And so you don't necessarily have to use us as a marketing agency, but if I can get you a better price than anybody else on your employee shirts, or if I can, get you name brand apparel at, a discount price, that's kind of where I'm at. And so absolutely, I've used all my connections from radio, being in at KXNO for 15 years. And then I grew up in Urbandale. I grew up in Des Moines. I've lived here the vast majority of my life. And so just utilizing those connections, and I never really wanted to get into like hard sales. I didn't want to sell, advertising or something intangible. I never saw myself as like a really good salesman, like a hard pitch, close the deal salesman. And so what really attracted me about this is, yes, it's sales to some extent, but it's also it's stuff that people need. Right. And so if you're an organization or a company, like, hey, we need merchandise for this or that, we need and so I'm just able to kind of take the headache out of that, because I've talked to a lot of people who have tried to do this on their own. It's something I used to try to do on my own at KXNO, and you just kind of, hey, we need koozies. I'll just Google koozies and slap a logo on it and hope that I get a decent price. And what I found is you're probably not getting a very good price when you do that. I can definitely get you a better price, but also, these companies try to nickel and dime you a lot. Not the local merchandise companies, but like the vendors that you get the stuff from. And sometimes it's a headache. You're dealing with people overseas, and it's just hard to communicate with. And so a lot of times people who try to do it on their own just kind of throw their hands up and say, you know what, screw it. I don't have the time or the patience to deal with this. And so that's kind of where I come in. And hopefully I'm able to step in and take all that off your plate. And you kind of tell me, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Can you do that for me? Or you say, hey, I've got this idea. I don't really know what I'm looking for. Can you help me throw some ideas together and figure something out? And so that's been the most fun thing. I've always liked merch. In radio, you get a lot of free stuff thrown at you. There's a lot of promotional items. I've always enjoyed that stuff. And so when I was able to kind of, use the connections I've had, help people, and then be in a field, learn a whole new, industry essentially, which, like any industry, when you get into it, is deeper and wider than you would have ever expected from the outside. It's been a lot of fun, man. I'm 3.5 months in, and so I'm still getting my feet under me, still kind of learning what I can and can't do, and what I'm good at, and all of that. But that's the exciting part. That's one of the reasons I left KXNO, was to try something completely different and learn a different industry and a different skill set, utilize my skills in a different way. And so it's been great. I'm super happy I made the move. I really like the people and the culture. That was a really big selling point for me, because again, nothing bad about iHeart or locally or any of the people who work there, but you just lost a lot of that culture, through the pandemic, and a lot of people working from home, a lot of people not coming back into the office through corporate layoffs, and just, fewer staff than ever before. All of a sudden you're dealing with people in all these different cities, and it's all via email. And so to be a locally owned company, to be employee owned, where everybody feels invested, and to have that culture where, it's like the Friday before the Super Bowl, we had a chili cook off, and we're having a Cinco de Mayo thing in a couple of weeks. And, just these little things, but they add up to, you spend so much time at work. You want to like the people you work with. You want to feel invested in the place you work, and the success of not just yourself and the company, but the other people as well. And so to be able to find all of that and have it be, 3 miles from my house and in a community I've lived in my whole life and have set roots down and plan to stay in, it's all just really been a perfect storm. And it's, again, 3.5 months in. I don't want to act like I know everything, but so far so good.
You said you weren't a salesman, but you sold me with chili cook-off.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That was right where I was fully bought in. So.
And they take it seriously too. Like, that was the fun part. Again, you never know what office culture is going to be like until you're actually in it. And the competition there between the chilies and the different styles that people came up with. And then, you hear the stories from the years before, and this person won last year and this person got second place last year, but they tweaked it this way. And so, yeah, it's just been really, really fun to kind of get to know everybody.
Yeah. Absolutely serious business. Thank you for sharing that. We maybe have some merchandise coming in our future for Three Beards, maybe from AKC?
Absolutely. Yes, we
Are
are
we
definitely
breaking
going to do
news?
that. No, well, I mean, well, I don't have any specific news to break, but it will come. I promise you that. I promise
All
that.
We're always trying to get the inside scoop here at Hawk's Eye View before anyone else. All right. Well, yeah, you mentioned Caitlin Clark and the Iowa women's team, and I feel like it's time to talk that because there's some big news today. Just a little bit ago, actually, a couple hours ago, Lucy Olson from Villanova, the third leading scorer behind Caitlin Clark and Juju Watkins, is signing up to be an Iowa Hawkeye for next year. The momentum's just rolling right now. Like, a lot of people were maybe concerned that we take a huge step back after Caitlin Clark, and I really think the momentum is kind of just going to move forward. So just curious what your thoughts were on, or what you knew about Lucy Olson, and or your thoughts on the future of the Iowa women's team.
Yeah, I mean, a huge kid, right? Like, I mean, this is as soon as you heard that she was in the transfer portal, you thought, man, what a perfect fit for Iowa, what a perfect fit for her. She's not going to be able to replace Caitlin Clark. Nobody would, but to have a scorer that's that prolific, to have a point guard, and then much like we talk about Caitlin Clark in the WNBA and playing with the players she'll be able to play with and how that'll enhance her game. I think playing in Lisa Bluder's system, playing this pace of basketball that Iowa plays, playing with Hannah Stolke and Sydney Falter and some of these other players will only do wonders for Lucy Olson and probably make her a better player next season than she even was last year at Villanova, where she was, first team All Big East and, as you said, third leading scorer in the country. And so super excited about that. One of the big criticisms of Lisa Bluder last offseason was that they didn't go into the portal and get anybody. And so to see them go in and grab one of the top names out of the portal this quickly this season, I think has been fantastic. And it's only going to kind of bridge that gap between what Caitlin Clark and those seniors were able to do and then the impact they're going to have down the road, right? Because the recruiting doesn't happen overnight. It's not professional sports. There is some degree of free agency as we talk about a transfer coming in, but you don't just reload like that. I was building a blue blood level women's basketball program, and it started with Megan Gustafson and even before that, and has carried over through the Caitlin Clark era. And now this will kind of help bridge that gap until we get some of the young, star recruits that we see coming into the program already. And so I think the sky's the limit for this program. I think being involved in some of the non-conference games that they already have set for next season is huge. To be in that 4-team thing with, I think they play Tennessee, but UConn and LSU are there as well. And so, or maybe South Carolina, not LSU. But anyway, that puts Iowa in, again, after this whole season where all eyes were on us, it maintains that level of elite competition and elite status, and it keeps you on TV and it keeps you in the minds of recruits and all of that. I think Lisa Bluder's a fantastic coach. I think we're starting to actually see how good she really is. I mean, she outcoached Dawn Staley last year. She outcoached Kim Mulkey and Gino Auriemma this year. The staff she has around her with Jan Jensen and the rest of them. I'm of the mindset, and this feels like a tall order, and it certainly is, because we just saw how hard it is to get to a Final Four. But if this program can get back to a Final Four in the next 3 years, if they can show post Caitlin Clark that they can maintain like an elite level, then I think it's like you are now a blue blood program. And as women's basketball continues to grow and continues to get bigger, and the talent pool continues to grow, you can be one of those big name schools. And there's not just going to be 3 or 4 like there were when we were growing up, right? There's going to be, like in men's basketball, 10 to 12 blue blood level programs that in any given season you think, hey, they have a chance to make a run. They're going to be ranked most years. They're going to be, the team nobody wants to see come March. And I think Iowa has a really golden opportunity right now to become one of those teams. They've been that over the last few years because of Caitlin Clark. But now if you can prove that this wasn't a one-woman show, this train is still moving and it's moving in the right direction, I really think the sky's the limit. And even beyond Lisa Bluder, because she's not going to be there forever, Is Iowa the type of program that can go pull Jenny Baranczyk out of Oklahoma, right? Or pull another Big Ten coach out of one of those schools and not have to go down and find the right fit, but go get whoever the heck you want because you're one of the top 5 jobs in the country. And I really think that's possible for Iowa. It's hard. It's going to be hard. There's no question about that. But I think it's possible. And I'm so excited for the future of this program.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Joe Hugan popped in with a comment and said that mid-range game is going to be lit. Yeah, that's for sure. We saw logo threes from Caitlin Clark, but anybody expecting that from like Lucy Olson, I know she can hit the 3, but I don't think that's going to be a regular thing in Iowa City next year. Very talented player, but again, a different player. So I think she's got a little bit more of a mid-range game from some of the stuff that I've seen. And yeah, AD, I think you're spot on. I was on their path to becoming a blue blood program in women's basketball, and I'm here for it. I mean, we've seen one recruit in 2025 come through in Addison Deal, and I know that they're in on several others. So with a good chance. So I'm feeling great, just like you are, that we're going to fill the void that's there for blue bloods and be one of them. Also, we got to give major credit to Brad Heinrichs and the work that he did with Swarm on this. I know that he was I know that NIL was a factor in this recruitment for sure. But the Iowa fans and Brad spearheading it from the collective side, I think that's been a huge boost in the effort that he's put in to all the programs in Iowa.
And like, anybody who donates to that or is involved in the Swarm, like, we're going to have to keep that energy up. And I know that, I mean, I even feel icky saying that because I don't think it should be on the fans to, pay that money to the players, but that's where we are right now. But then also, us as fans, we have to keep buying tickets to these games, and you're not going to sell out Carver Hawkeye Arena every night. But stay engaged, learn about these new players, right? Like, create this relationship that we just had with Gabby Marshall and Kate Martin with these new players, and buy these tickets, go to these games when they're on TV, watch those games, like, keep these numbers up. That's really, it's going to take all of us to keep this momentum going. It's not going to be just the team or obviously that's the big part, but one of the reasons people want to come to Iowa is because you can play in front of 15,000 people every night, right? And one of the reasons they want to come is because you're the top billing team on TV. And if we as fans can kind of keep that up, if we can keep the money in the coffers of the Swarm so they can compete on the NIL level, I think that's really important too. Like, we do have a say in this as Hawkeye fans.
AD, you were talking about the strength of the non-con schedule next year with that group of 4. I mean, look at the new Big Ten coming around the corner next year. We got Juju Watkins coming into the Big Ten, USC, UCLA. I mean, Oregon's been up there as a blue blood program in the last decade or so as well. It's going to be really interesting how those teams augment into the Big Ten, because there may be 3 or 4 blue bloods in the Big Ten alone. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, Indiana and Ohio State are as good as anybody in the country year in and year out. Rutgers has a really good history of women's basketball. A lot of these places do. And then, I mean, you kind of forget that Juju Watkins is a Big Ten player next year. Like, it's almost bizarre to remember that. But it's going to be here before you know it. It's because I even had that thought, like, oh, I wonder if Lucy Olson will, lead the conference in scoring, and maybe she will, but she's going to have a heck of a challenger in the, the second leading scorer this past season. And I think that's going to be really fun on the women's basketball side as well.
For sure.
Yeah. Oh, well, we've enjoyed this conversation. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break and hear from our sponsors at Revelton and Kyle Landman at Wintrust Mortgage.
Why take the best corn in the world and make it into fuel when you could make it into whiskey? That's the question that launched Revelton, Iowa's most visible and fastest growing distillery. Owners Rob and Christy Taylor embrace the grain-to-glass philosophy, sourcing ingredients locally and overseeing on-premises production and bottling at their facility in Osceola. One sip and you'll agree that Revelton's handcrafted whiskeys, gins, and vodkas are the best you've ever tasted. And with the launch of their rye whiskey, made with 100% Iowa-grown rye and corn, And their new bourbon coming soon, there's more Revelton to love than ever. Iowa's own Revelton Distillery. ReveltonDistillery.com.
Are you in the market for a new house and unsure of the mortgage process? Want to know that you have someone looking out for you? Kyle Lehman from Wintrust Mortgage is a down-to-earth, knowledgeable lender who can be there for you in your corner. He can work with you in any of the 50 states and is just what you need to expand your home search. Kyle will work with you through the entire process with little to no work from you. Take the worry of the mortgage process out of the equation so that you can focus on looking for your dream home. Contact Kyle at www.wintrust.com/Kyle-Lehman or call him at 515-473-0546.
Thank you, as always, to our sponsors. We appreciate them, all of them. We want to shift the conversation to football. I know we just got done talking about the Caitlin Clark effect and Iowa women's basketball and where it's going. But also, I kind of wanted to highlight the Andrew Downs effect. I don't think people who have listened to the show know the role that you've played in me maybe getting here. I give you some credit for it because you kept this little show on KXNO going in Football Friday Night.
Yeah.
You were a huge supporter of the show, and so got to thank you for that. And that's how I got my start in talking about sports, honestly. And that's where I discovered that I love talking about sports. And a big part of the reason why I reached out to Chris Shipley about doing this podcast was I spent all this time talking about high school football on Football Friday Nights on KXNO, and I still do that. Still love it. But AD, thank you for the effect that you've had on me specifically with supporting Football Friday Night. So
yeah, man, I appreciate that. I mean, I started on Football Friday Night when I was still a WHO radio board operator before I'd ever been on KXNO. I started as a correspondent on Football Friday Night. I produced that show for several years. That was one of my favorite things that we did on KXNO. It's something I always fought to keep. Corporate doesn't always want you to do things like that. And when you have, 12 to 15 correspondents who you have to pay and have to, like, as you know, Andrew, we had some headaches getting you guys into the system and, all the legal stuff you have to deal with.
Right.
It's probably easier to just not do it. That's a long night for a lot of people to do. But that's what local radio is. I mean, that in and of itself was like the peak of local radio. And when you're driving home from your high school football game and you can just turn on KXNO and hear highlights and stats and scores from every other game in not just in Des Moines, but across Central Iowa and throughout the state, that was always so great. And then it's guys like you, Andrew. It's people who have other jobs who aren't doing this full time, but love sports radio, want to do something like this. The amount of passion that the correspondents bring, the amount of work they put into it, the amount of attention to detail they have. That's not an easy thing to go out there every Friday night for not very much money and keep those stats and make those phone calls and, sometimes have to do play-by-play live, on the radio and in big games. But that's how you cut your teeth, right? Like you get those reps in. And again, yeah, that's how you find out, hey, not only is this something I like, it's something I'm pretty good at, it's something I'm pretty comfortable with. I'm doing it more and more. And maybe I will try it. And the coolest thing about like this era is you can just start a podcast, right? It's like you don't have to get hired by somebody. Somebody has to take a chance on you at some level, but for the most part, you can just buy a microphone, buy a computer, download a program and start talking. And so I appreciate you saying that because, man, Football Friday Night, I think it was always so important to KXNO. I hope it's something they always continue to do. It was always a top priority of mine as program director. That is one of the best things we do as a radio station, and it's because of guys like you who care so much about it.
I know a few of the guys are listening, so I think they'll appreciate your words. Especially, I think hopefully Joe Stacy's listening.
Yeah, Joe's my guy.
I know he knows about this, so hopefully Joe Stacy's out there listening to this podcast right now.
He means business. That's all I know.
Yeah,
yes, it does.
My 5 cents of that whole thing is technology is great, right? I've transplanted here into the DC area about 3 years ago, and I can listen to all those shows right here.
Yeah. Yes.
It makes my work days go by so much quicker, whether it's the morning rush Miller and Condon, all the way through to the drive and Friday night football. Like oftentimes my Newton Cardinals are on there being covered, so I can listen to them because KCOB and Newton doesn't really do online radio, right? So I got to be within like 30 miles of Newton to be able to listen to the live broadcast. Yeah. But the technology is great, and all the programming in the past and will be in the future is great for me being still out here in DC. So it's wonderful.
And that's one of the coolest things. You do sports talk radio and you kind of think like, it's you don't take it all that seriously. It's not all that serious, especially when you're down the hall from WHO radio, where they're talking about serious things, and you've got presidential candidates coming through and the governor and stuff like that. And we're over here talking about, this fun stuff. But people really get connected to it. And one of my favorite things that people have told me throughout the years is they moved away, and this, KXNO was their connection to their local community, and not just sports, because nobody only cares about sports, but sports and pop culture and, just kind of news and things like that. That was always one of my favorite things that people would tell us. And then, when the pandemic hit, we legitimately didn't know what we were going to do. The day before, like, everything closed, Keith Murphy, Andy Fales, Scott Sipker, and myself went and had lunch and literally had a brainstorming session about, okay, if sports stop, how does this show continue? What are we going to do to fill 2 hours every day when we don't have sports to talk about? And what we found is we had so much to talk about. And then radio is such a car thing, right? There's a reason the morning show and the afternoon show are most important, because that's when most people are in their cars. A lot of people don't go home and turn on their radio. They have it on in the car, though. And so we thought, when people stop driving to and from the office every day, or they stop going out, they start, when they're just stuck at home, are they even going to find us? Are they even going to care about what we have to say? And what we learned is we were maybe the only thing that stayed normal when the whole world shut down, and people listened to us more and they craved it more. And just having those shows there every day, even though the rest of the world had changed and they weren't going to the office anymore and their kids weren't going to school and everything kind of felt weird, they turn on the radio at 2:00 and Murph and Andy were there. And yeah, we weren't talking about the game last night because there wasn't a game last night, but we were still making fart jokes and then still being serious, we carried the governor's press conference for months and months and talked about, these terrible numbers and all the fear and all of that. And so that's such a cool thing about local radio that I hope never dies. It's why I think local, especially talk radio, is so important, is because of that connection to the community. It's really hard to manufacture that. Even like with what you guys do at Three Beards, which I love and am a big fan of. It's different than when you're on the air in the moment all day, every day, right? It's if news breaks, you guys can go live and then post it as a podcast, and people may consume it at some point. You're on the air and something happens, you're just talking about it, and you start to take phone calls, and there's something about that I think is valuable, and I hope keeps local radio, especially like I said, talk radio, alive, because you're servicing a need that nobody else can even service. And I appreciate you guys saying that, because those are the things that made it hard for me to leave my job. They were the parts of my job that were the coolest, were the kind of connections you have to people, the impact you can make on people, even though you're just talking sports and having fun and not taking things too seriously.
That's good. Sports radio has just been a huge part of my life, and Drew, I know your life as well. I see you commenting on all the stuff all the time.
Still. 100%. Right? Yeah. Like AD said, it's a way to stay connected with your local community when you're not around.
Right.
I'm kind of curious, before we kind of move on, AD, what do you get those like reports of what numbers look like from like the iHeart, like mobile, like you get like the geo data, like all that stuff. Do you get like or used to get? Sorry.
Yeah. So it's the digital stuff makes it a lot easier, because when you log on to your iHeart or when you listen to a podcast, there's a hard number there, right? And so we know exactly how many people are doing that, and those numbers are growing and growing, and that's becoming a bigger and bigger part of the industry. And so that part of it, absolutely. The ratings, though, like the Nielsen ratings, were always so difficult, because they literally send out a diary like a blank booklet to people, and I think $5, and ask you to write down what you listen to at any given, like for an entire week. And so you do that and you send it back in, and then they extrapolate that with statistics, and they figure out how many people are listening to your station. And so that's just such a hard way to do it, right? I mean, you're not getting a real number. I know I, as a procrastinator, would probably wait till the last day and then think, I usually listen to this, and so I write that down, or maybe I really like one station, and so I want them to do well. So even if I'm not listening, I have a meeting Thursday afternoon, so I couldn't hear KXNO, but I want KXNO to get the credit, so I'm going to write that down. It's just there's just no really good way to measure the actual audience, and so I always utilize things like our social media impact, our podcast numbers and our streaming numbers for sure. But just, when we went out to events, how many people came, and what, people just in my life, when they talk to me, what do they talk about? What shows do they like? What shows do they hate? What topics do they like? I always felt like you got a better gauge of how you were actually affecting people and reaching people just through that than you did through the hard numbers that you get, because those come and go. And if you dictate everything you do by the up and down of the ratings, I would send out a ratings email to my staff every quarter. Every time we get a book, every 3 months, we'd get this full book. And it was so important for sales and for, just keeping our jobs, right? All of that stuff. It was so important. And the very first line I'd put in every report I gave was, take this with a grain of salt. And that's whether it was the worst book we had or the best book we had, right? Like, this doesn't mean that much. Sure, we can celebrate this for a little while, and maybe we'll make a little extra money because sales will be able to sell us at a little higher of a rate. But then a year from now, when this is the opposite, we can't let that get us down either, right? Like, and you have to trust what you're doing, move ahead with it, and then hope for the best, because the numbers are a really, really fickle thing.
That's true. I think you could apply that to life. If you're just doing it for the people who are watching, then what are you really doing it for?
Absolutely.
I think that's what you're getting at with those numbers. So we can move on a little bit here. We wanted to get your thoughts on the Iowa football offense, specifically the new offensive coordinator, Tim Lester. I'm a little bit more wanting to believe the reports I'm hearing of Tim Lester's in full control. He's introducing motion. Some people would say he's introducing like a Shanahan, Matt LaFleur offense. I know a lot of people are in believe it when they see it mode. I'm just curious where you're falling with all of that and what you've heard. And
Andrew Barber is naive, AD. That's what.
I might be a little naive.
Well, because I wanted to get Drew's take before I give mine too. Because are you on the other side of that?
I am on the other side. I'm a wait and see. Reports are reports, man. We've heard those for years. You know what I mean? Like, we're gonna see some change. We got Deacon Hill still taking first team reps, and I understand it's because Cade McNamara is not ready to go. I understand that, but you're telling me Marco Lainez doesn't give you a better chance to win football games? I have a problem with it. I have a problem with that. We saw that in one quarter of play in the bowl game, that he was a better option. He might not be able to throw the football, but he was explosive running the football, at least at bare minimum.
So overall, I lean more towards Andrew, and I just try to. I'm an optimistic person. I try to look at the positive things to a fault, right? Like, I believe things when I shouldn't believe them. Like, I am excited for this offense, even though I know there's a pretty good chance it's going to come back and bite me in the ass. And yeah, it's a great comment.
Come on, Teddy. Come on,
at
Teddy.
Least 950. I hope Deacon Hill doesn't get the opportunity to throw for that many yards. The Deacon Hill thing worries the heck out of me. I mean, the fact that he's still, and that's not on Tim Lester, and maybe he should be a better quarterback developer than Brian Ferentz was. I mean, I think the most damning thing about Brian Ferentz's tenure as offensive coordinator was the inability to recruit and develop quarterbacks. Because Cade McNamara, I hope he's healthy, and I hope he's great, and I hope everything works out. But we're really banking on that again, because that's basically what the hope was last year, and we saw how that went. I mean, he didn't even get through Kids Day without an injury. That's 2 years in a row he's missed with an injury. And so to assume he's going to be healthy for 12, 14, 15 games I think is it's troubling. And the fact that we're sitting here in April and apparently the next best option is still Deacon Hill, it's unacceptable, to be honest. I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. Try to go get somebody in this portal, try to develop Linus quicker. But that part of it worries me, because I do tend to believe the players when they say, hey, Kirk Ferentz hasn't even really been around the offense. He's with the offensive line, but this is Tim Lester's show. And I believe Caleb Brown when he says, hey, there's more motion and there's things going, and I'm excited to play in this offense. And even Deacon Hill saying, hey, we're taking more shots downfield and all of that kind of stuff. I do believe those guys. The question is, how long does that last? How many strikes does Tim Lester get before Kirk Ferentz comes in and takes things over? And the Deacon Hill taking most of the first team reps is a vestige of the Kirk Ferentz era, right? That's Kirk Ferentz saying, hey, this is the guy I want to be our backup because I trust him for whatever reason, even though he threw so many picks last year and fumbled the ball a bunch of times. For whatever reason, Kirk Ferentz sees Deacon Hill as a legitimate option, and whether or not Tim Lester does is irrelevant. And that part worries me, because I think the best thing Kirk Ferentz could do, as we all know and as we've all talked about, is let go of this offense and focus on the things he does best, allow his coaches to change and bring this offense into the 21st century. And again, I think that's great in the first couple of weeks of the season, but if you're down by 17 points at halftime in your first Big Ten game and you've thrown a couple of interceptions because you've taken more chances than you usually take, is that when Kirk Ferentz comes in and says, all right, Tim, nice try, but we can't lose this game. We can't lose these games. The way I do it will win us 10 games. I know that for a fact. I do it over and over again. And so have a seat. We're going to go back to game management football. We're going to let our defense win this thing, which on one hand is great. I like winning 10 games, and I like watching. Maybe it's because I'm an Iowa fan, but I love watching good defense. I love watching our defense play. Cornerback is my favorite position in football. I just love the way those guys, the attitude they have to have, the swagger they have to have. They're usually small, but they play against the biggest guys, but they're fast and they're quick and they're tough and they get beat and then they come right back and they beat you. Like, I love that. I really like watching defensive football. I want to see Iowa score some more points. I want to see Iowa be a little more competitive against some of these teams, and not just hang their hat on, hey, our defense is only going to give up 10 points, so we only need to score 13 to win. So yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle. I definitely lean more towards Andrew and trying to stay optimistic. But I also understand that makes me pretty naive. Like I can look in the mirror and at least say to myself, like, you're probably being had again here, because you believed it 2 years ago and you believed it last year, and you'll believe it, I guess, until it just. Again, I'm the eternal optimist when it comes to this. Now during the games, I'm not. I get mad. I'm like, as soon as Iowa is down in anything, I'm like, we're gonna lose. I get up, So like, if my wife hearing me say, "Oh, I'm the eternal optimist," is probably laughing at me right now. She's like, "You?" But in a big picture sense, I try to stay optimistic. I still think Fran McCaffrey's the guy to take this team, to the promised land. As dumb as some of these things sound, even coming out of my mouth, I just that's how I guess choose to look at this stuff. And so I'm staying optimistic. We'll see how the spring game goes. I don't know that we'll learn much about the team this Saturday. Hopefully we don't lose anybody else in the portal. Hopefully they can somehow go out and get some sort of a quarterback in the portal who can at least serve as a backup, or at least because one of the more tiring things is just the discussion we all have as fans and on social media. It's like if it wasn't so toxic at times on social media, I wonder how I would feel differently about these teams, because I just don't want to deal with another year of an inept offense and then all of us complaining about it for an entire season.
Yeah, I kind of want to spin off on that, AD. How would you define success for the 2024 Iowa Hawkeyes then? We've seen year in, year out, like you just said, Kirk Ferentz is okay with 10-win seasons. And by and large, we should be too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But we want it to be sexy. We want to score. We want all we want it all. AD. We want it all.
We do.
But how would you define success in the 2024 season then? Again, with the Big Ten changing, with USC, Oregon, Washington coming into the fold, what does success look like?
So I think the biggest change that's happened over the last 3 or 4 years, that is a big reason why we've seen fans not be excited about 10-win seasons and not be excited about what they're seeing on the field, is we haven't competed in the big games against the really good teams. And we can beat teams that are worse than us, and we can beat teams that are as good as us. I mean, more often than not, when Iowa lines up against a team that's of equal talent, Iowa's going to win, because Kirk Ferentz is a great coach, and they do have a great system, and they have a great defense, and that carries you a long way. When you know you're not going to even score points against Michigan or even a Tennessee team that wasn't that good. That's good, but it wasn't that good.
With like half the roster opted out too.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Absolutely. I mean, I did a podcast leading up to that game, and the guy, I mean, he was excited about the quarterback they had, but he's like, this is a whole different team than it was a month ago. Like, we have no idea what we're going to see. And what we saw is they kicked Iowa's ass. And I think that's the part that people have a hard time swallowing. And that's why you're seeing people call for Kirk Ferentz's head, even though he's, they're going to build a statue of him outside of the stadium, and he's still at the top of his game in a lot of ways. It's the lack of competition against those really good teams. And so to define success, I mean, it's a tough schedule. I don't know that 10 wins is in the cards for this season. I don't think you should expect to even compete for a Big Ten championship year in and year out. Every couple of years, every few years, you should expect to have a team at Iowa that you think, hey, we could go up against the USCs and the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Washingtons. That's not going to be every year. So I don't think you can set success at that level. I think you have to compete in those games. You have to show that you at least belong in the field with those teams. And if you lose to Ohio State by 21, that feels a lot different than losing by 50. Right. And it feels different even getting beaten badly when you're scoring points. I mean, if Iowa had lost that bowl game 45-20, it would have felt a lot different than 35-0 or whatever it ended up being. You didn't score points against so I mean, you didn't even give yourself an opportunity to win. So it's not a great answer, because I don't have like a hard and fast, this is what success looks like next season. And especially with the transition, I think you have to see a different offense. I think you have to see some wide receivers get more action. I think the Luke Lachey thing is going to be fun. I think the running backs are solid. You really need to see guys like Caleb Brown and some of these other receivers take a big step, because, again, the recruitment of receivers is an issue, and it's going to be until you can prove that you're actually utilizing them. And if you're a receiver, why would you come to Iowa? We need to show them why they can come. And so I want to see some things like that. As far as wins and losses, man, beat the teams that you're supposed to beat and compete with the teams that you maybe aren't. I don't know if you can beat Ohio State or Washington next season, but you can't get shut out in both of those games. If that happens again, it's going to feel like you're stuck in the mud, and you can start to understand why people want change.
Yeah, I think for me, the schedule is there for Iowa to make a college football playoff in the new 12 team. And so for me, I'll be right up front and say, make the playoff. Or
hell yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
like, it's 12 teams. I don't feel like
the thing. It's 12 teams. You don't have to, you probably don't even want to get to a Big Ten championship game. But if you put yourself in a position to be third or fourth in the Big Ten, you don't have to play that last game. You don't have to show the world that you can't really compete with Ohio State or Michigan, right? You lose a tough game to Michigan, you lose a game to Washington, but you beat Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa State, all these other teams. It's not out of the question. I mean, this defense has been and will be championship caliber. If the offense was even decent the last couple of years, we're probably talking about getting close to a college football playoff, and that's a 4-teamer. Like you're pointing out, Andrew, it's tripling in size. I mean, you don't have to be the best team in the country anymore. You can just be pretty damn good. I mean, if we had 12-team playoffs, I would have been in it several times already. So I may not go there right now. Talk to me in the fall, but I don't think you're crazy for making the prediction.
I'm really curious as to see what this elite defense, how it translates to the air raid that the Pac-12 teams are coming in with. And I say that like on a week in, week out basis now, not just like a one-off bowl game against USC that we've played a time or two here. It kicked their ass, they kicked our ass, whatever. Like it didn't really matter, right? But like a week in, week out basis, I want to see how this defense matches up in the air raid, because we've struggled in the past with that. Even like the Penix, Indiana days, Purdue, when they have a quarterback like they typically do more times than not. Teams that have air raid offenses, Iowa has struggled with, and kind of that week-to-week regular season format.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they adjust to that, and how long it takes them to adjust to the new Big Ten. I do wonder, because so many people are calling for like massive change, right? And obviously, if you change Kirk Ferentz, like you don't know what you're going to get in the next hire and what kind of even style of football you're going to play. We're all so accustomed to this defensive first, try to run the ball, utilize tight ends type of football, but there's no guarantee that the next head coach will play that way. I do wonder if you're almost better off, because when Iowa was competing in those big games, when they were, the Ohio State game in 2017 was such an outlier. But when they're beating teams like Michigan, who was ranked, second in 2016, was it? When they were winning games like that, it was because they played differently than most of the other teams, right? And that's going to be even more so the case when you bring in these Pac-12 teams. And so you almost wonder, because you're never going to out-recruit Ohio State for wide receivers, and you're never going to out-recruit USC for quarterbacks, and you're never going to compete at Iowa with some of those schools on those levels. So is it better to be the weird team, and when they come to Iowa City, they're not ready for you, because you're unlike anybody they've played all season? It really doesn't benefit them in the offseason to work on how to attack you, because you're so different than everybody else. That maybe you can, again, nobody wants to see these kind of sloggy games, but this is how Iowa has beaten teams like this historically. And so if it takes playing differently, and again, not as terribly as the offense has been the last couple of years, these last 4 years have been such an outlier. But if we could even get back to like the mid 2010s level of offense, maybe it is better to be a little different and to not try to air the ball out all the time, and to be that kind of team that limits possessions and that punts the ball really well and plays that field position game and has great special teams. And a team like, a Washington or a USC who hasn't had to deal with that, who hasn't recruited to that level. We saw Nebraska and how difficult it has been for them to kind of adjust to that Big Ten West style of football, which is a unique style of football. And I don't expect USC or Washington to have that much trouble, but it is going to be a change. They are going to be playing different caliber teams, different caliber defenses. The Big Ten West isn't a division anymore, but those teams aren't going away. Like USC still has to play Iowa and Wisconsin and Minnesota and Illinois. And if enough of us have those, they're going to have trouble with these defenses. They really are. And so maybe not trying to be like the cool kids and try to out recruit these teams. You're never going to win on that level. You're never going to have the NIL budget that these teams have. You're just not, it's not going to happen. So how do you use your advantages to your advantage? How do you find the things that you're really good at and then capitalize on those? Iowa did such a good job of that for so long under Kirk Ferentz. And again, like I said a little bit earlier, I think the most disappointing thing for a lot of fans over these last few years is they haven't been able to do that. And so it'll be really interesting to see how they adjust, how this offense adjusts. But as you said, Drew, how these other teams coming into the league are forced to adjust, because again, if 4-year games every year are against the top 6 defenses in the country, you're going to have to change the way you play and you recruit and you develop. Even if you are a Washington or a USC, you're going to have to, the Big Ten is going to dictate to some extent the style of play in the league, even though we're bringing in, four teams that are completely different.
It truly breaks my heart that the Pac-12 is gone. Honestly, it's a staple. It was around 111 years or something like that. It's just Pac-12 after dark. I always love watching, like, kick it off at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday. Like, I have nothing better to do. But like the pageantry, the traditional Rose Bowl will never be the same again. Like, I'm a traditionalist, I guess, AD. So like it hurts my heart inside that the Pac-12 just squandered everything.
Yeah. I agree. They really did, and it's too bad that, like, within just a few years and some poor leadership, just completely ended, as you said, over a century's worth of tradition and history. It is a shame, and it's gonna suck, and it's gonna be weird. It's gonna take a long time to get used to these new leagues. I don't even really know off the top of my head, like, who's all going where. I think if I sit down and think about it, I could. But if you were just like throw a team at me right now, are they one of those teams going to the ACC? No, they're one of the teams going to the Big 12. No, they're coming to the Big 10. It's just and some of it's just old guys, shouting at clouds at this point. But it's like the traditions that we grew up loving. I'll never go to a Rose Bowl and it'll be like it was, right? Like I missed out on my opportunity I didn't go in 2015.
You didn't miss it. You didn't miss anything, Andrew.
Didn't miss much there. Yeah. But I missed out on my opportunity to attend a Rose Bowl where the Big Ten champion plays the Pac-12 champion, and it's too bad that's going away. The regionality of it really, really sucks. There's so much about this new era of college sports that suck. But hey, I'm still watching.
Hey, I won't miss the Pac-12 network because I never saw it because there was no way to get it.
Right, exactly.
Herein lies the problem.
Yeah, there's the problem with the Pac-12 is they had so much stuff on the Pac-12 network. I mean, Pac-12 games on what, CW or ION or something like that.
I know, and you're in like the biggest media, one of the biggest media markets in the world. You're like, you're all over California. You have huge cities all over that. I mean, the little Big Ten in all these like little Midwestern college towns, and you've got teams in LA and in Phoenix, essentially, in Arizona State, and it's you have all of California, for God's sakes. I mean, you have more people than anybody else. It's wild that they were able to blow that kind of what they had.
Yeah, absolutely. Drew, did you want to shift the conversation to men's basketball? I know you're dying to talk men's basketball.
Yeah, we could go with men's basketball. AD just got done saying that he thinks Fran McCaffery is going to take us to the promised land.
Hey, I'm an optimist.
Just a general state of the program in your eyes, AD. I mean, Patrick McCaffery, his own son, goes to Butler, losing Tony Perkins to Missouri. Like, what? I don't even know what to say after that. Like, so much talent lost, so much production lost.
For sure. Picked up a transfer today from Morehead State, and like he looks to be a good what's his name? Drew. Oh yeah, another Drew.
Drew Selwell.
I love him already.
Yeah, right. He looks to be a pretty good point guard. I mean, you love what you saw out of Owen Freeman and Brock Harding and Lajay Dembele, and I think Peyton Sanford's going to come back and have a big senior season. So on like on the micro scale, I'm not super worried about it. I mean it's not the Murray twins, right? And that's part of college football or college basketball, college sports on the men's side. It's like you think about, man, this last season, they should have had both Murray brothers. I mean, Keegan Murray scored 32 points last night in an NBA play-in game and, knocked out the Warriors dynasty for good. Should have been a senior at Iowa this year. And I know that's not the way it works, but there are these things, some context I think is necessary. The problem though, isn't on the micro scale. And we could talk about X's and O's and, who the go-to guy will be and recruiting and all of that stuff till we're blue in the face. The problem with this program, as much as it sucks, is that there's this monkey on the back of not getting to a Sweet 16. And until that happens, every season is going to be judged against that. And no matter how good or how bad or how surprising or how unexpected, right? Or like how over their skis, like I think this past season, ultimately, Iowa played better and had a better season than most people thought they were going to. Now it ended terribly with those last couple of losses and not making the NCAA tournament. But if they win one of those games against Illinois and they're in the NCAA tournament, it is an absolute success of a season by any measure. And if Iowa loses on Sunday of the NCAA tournament, nobody cares about what that regular season was. It doesn't matter that they won 8 of their last 10 games. It doesn't matter that they played themselves into the NCAA tournament when nobody thought they were going to. All that matters is they didn't get to a Sweet 16. And I hate that because I hate how much weight we put on the NCAA tournament in a 30-game season. But I also understand it. It's reality. Those are the most important games. And Iowa just hasn't succeeded in those. And so I think it's a moot point to even talk about expectations or the future of, like next year's team or anything. Again, as bad as it sucks, until Iowa gets to a Sweet 16, when that happens, we can then hit the reset button and reassess and realize we're probably the 8th best program in the Big Ten. So finishing in the top half of that league year in and year out, getting to the NCAA tournament, winning 20 games, these are successful things. And these are things that no other coach has ever been able to do on this regular of a basis. Put guys into the NBA the way that Fran has, find diamonds in the rough and develop them. But none of that matters until they get to a Sweet 16. And that really, really sucks because that's a hard thing to do. And it's just getting harder and harder. And so there's a disconnect between this program and the players and the coaches and the fan base. And that's a bridge that I don't know how is going to be gapped, or a gap that I don't know how is going to be bridged. Fans just don't care. And even in big games and even when they're playing well, we just don't support this team generally as a fan base. And that really hurts. It hurts recruiting. It obviously hurts NIL stuff. We've heard the McCaffrey brothers, but others also talk about how hard it is to play a game in that arena when there's 4,000 people there and nobody really cares, and how exciting it is when there's 15,000 people there and everybody's on their feet. It really does make a difference. And so this program is just in a really, really bad spot because it has to accomplish something that's objectively hard to accomplish, but also objectively should have been done at some point in the last 25 years. It's ridiculous to this point that it hasn't been done. And as unfair as it is, no season will be judged on the merits of the season until a team gets to a Sweet 16. And then again, when that happens and we can put it behind us, and it's not this terrible thing that we're all waiting to, like rear its ugly head, then we can reassess and understand that, hey, winning 23 games and getting bounced by a 2 seed in the first weekend of the NCAA tournament isn't a terrible season. I had a lot of fun that season. Hey, remember the shot they hit in that game, and remember when they beat Wisconsin. And there are a lot of I hate that college basketball is boiled down to those last couple of games because college basketball is my favorite sport. And the 2 games a week and the ups and downs and you can beat anybody on any given night and the hot streaks and the cold streaks and all of it is so much fun. But it all gets boiled down to those last couple of games. And I understand why they're the most important games. And I think it hurts Iowa and it hurts Fran McCaffrey that they haven't had success in the Big Ten tournament either. They won the thing a few years ago, but outside of that, I mean, losing that first game in the Big Ten tournament sucks. I mean, that makes you feel terrible and it really puts a damper on things. And then you go lose your second game in the NCAA tournament and it just, it all falls apart. And you really are left with this feeling that the season was a disappointment, even though when Luka was a senior and Iowa was a top 5 team for like most of the season, that was like, did you not have fun? Are you not entertained? Like that's what we're fans for, is to live through seasons like that. But it all feels like it was terrible because they lost to Oregon in the whatever the second game of the NCAA tournament. And so that's the thing I hate most about it being an Iowa fan right now, is that until the men's team gets to a Sweet 16, nothing else is going to matter.
It's funny you say that, AD. I just want to get this off my chest, Andrew, and I'll let you have your turn real quick.
Go ahead.
But I am the reason why you are upset, AD. I am that fan. I am the fan that we've had Wooden Award winners and candidates in second place, folks. We've had the talent to do it. That's my problem.
Yeah.
And the same way with football. Like, imagine George Kittle and Noah Fant and all those guys being on the same football team, and George Kittle just now an All-Pro. And, like, George came out and was like, well, I didn't really care then, I guess, like in college, like I didn't really try. Like,
yeah.
So, like, what are we doing either on both sides? But the problem with me is we've had the talent to do so and haven't. over the course of, like you said, 25 years. Was it 14 years of Fran McCaffrey now? We'll be going into 15.
Yep.
It's the fact that we've had the talent to do so. And that's not taken away from having joy during the season. I've most definitely had joy with Luka Garza's years, the Murray twins years, like all of that. Peter Jock,
Jared,
Jared
camp, right? Like, and like you feel like these guys'
Aaron White,
careers didn't mean anything because, right?
Mike Gesell, Jordan Bohannon, like
Exactly.
all this shit could not produce 2 tournament wins. That's why
I know, and
so I am your problem, AD.
And you are right is the thing, right? Like, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's to this point bizarre that it hasn't happened just by chance. And part of that, again, if we want to like put all the context around this, that Oregon team that beat Iowa is the only team in NCAA tournament history to get a bye in the first round, right?
Yep.
The team they were supposed to play got COVID. They didn't have to play. Now, I don't know if Iowa beats that Oregon team. They weren't matched up well with them as it was, but that team didn't have to play 2 days earlier, and Iowa did. Iowa has never had, in this 25-year run, has never had an upset happen in front of them in the bracket. They've played the highest seeded team possible every time, right? Like there's never been a 14 that upsets a 3 and now you get to play a 14. Nope, you're playing the 3, baby. And they've been so close that comeback against Cincinnati, was it?
Tennessee.
Yeah, that was the season where we had the comeback.
That was not
Tennessee comeback.
We had the comeback against Tennessee in the first round. Then it was Cincinnati.
Yes.
Came back and fell short in that.
Or no, they beat Cincinnati right in the first round and lost to Tennessee in overtime.
Yeah.
Isaiah Moss. I'll never forget.
Yeah, that Sunday morning, right? And so it's like you see why sports fans start to believe in curses, right? Because like at some point it just gets ridiculous, and it really feels like there's some sort of like Iowa curse when it comes to the Sweet 16, where, I mean, the Richmond Spiders are going to have the greatest game of their life. And you're out of, all of a sudden your guys can't shoot. And like and part of that is Fran McCaffrey. We're going to provide all the context, right? Like Fran McCaffrey has not been a great in-game coach, and certainly not in those games, but really even in all the games, he has trouble figuring out lineups. Sometimes he'll throw weird lineups out there. He has trouble figuring out when to call a timeout to stop runs. And that's such a huge thing in the NCAA tournament, because it's a game of runs more than anything with that amount of momentum. In the NCAA tournament, Fran has been a bad in-game coach in some of these things. And when you play the style of basketball that Iowa plays, you're liable to get bit, right? It's kind of like with Iowa football. If you only score 10 points a game, your defense might win you 10 games, but you're going to lose some games if you're only scoring 10 points, right? If you're Iowa and you're banking on having a good shooting night every single night, and you're not going to play defense and you have to score 90, but you're only going to give up 88, well, if you give up 88 every night and you score 90 20 times, that's great. You win 20 games. But one of those nights, you're not going to score 90. And that's, again, it's part of Fran McCaffrey's system and the way he recruits and the way he calls the game. That's bitten Iowa too. They've missed on a bunch of really good point guards. They haven't had the guard play that you need in March to succeed. And so it's a confluence of a lot of different factors. But it does get to the point where you're like, are we just like, did somebody put a curse on us at some point? I don't really believe in that stuff, but like maybe I should.
Yeah, you got to kind of have assistant coaches that cover up your weaknesses as a head coach. And I don't think Iowa basketball has that. I don't want to call out the whole entire coaching staff, but like we don't have a defensive specialist on the staff.
No.
We have a bunch of guys who are well-versed in offense. So it's like we're doubling and tripling down on our strength. And
does that sound familiar? Double and tripling down?
Yeah, right. And having a stagnant staff that,
But see, like you have Phil Parker, who Kirk Ferentz completely trusts. And Kirk Ferentz has shown a willingness at times to adapt in his way.
Yeah.
But like Fran I don't think the adaptability is there with Fran. I think Fran is like set in his way.
Yeah, there's a stubbornness there. Yeah.
There's a stubbornness there. That like Kirk is stubborn, but not to the point where it's like detrimental to himself all the time.
Yes.
That's what I see.
It's a bad spot for the men's basketball program right now, because it's just like nothing is working and nobody seems to care. And like, it's just, So like even as a guy who likes Fran McCaffrey and wants, is glad he's coming back next year and hopes he's the guy who leads Iowa to the Sweet 16 and beyond. Iowa can't survive another season. He can't survive another season like the one we just had. If Iowa doesn't have like a go-to player, if they miss completely in the portal outside of this guy they picked up today, because they still need to go get at least one more piece, probably a defensive big. But if they're unable to do that, and then if they get smoked by a really good Iowa State team in the non-conference, if they start out 0-2 in the Big Ten in December like they just always do, because they always have to play Purdue and a Wisconsin team that can't lose or something like that.
Bullshit?
Yeah, right. Like
Bullshit
they'll play at Michigan State and then Purdue at home, and they'll have Iowa State on one side of that and Creighton on the other. They'll play 4 games in 12 days, and it's just they put themselves in bad spots. But if that happens again, and people aren't going to Carver Hawkeye Arena, and you don't have Caitlin Clark to kind of suck up all the air out of the room and give you a reason to care through a terrible Iowa winter about the Hawkeyes, and your wrestling team's losing to freaking Penn State again and again, right? Like,
yeah,
there's been a lot to take the pressure off a little bit. If they have another season like they did this year, and people don't care, and they maybe play themselves to the bubble but ultimately fall short, I think at that point you have to make a change, and that change is going to be hard because we're so used to our coaches at this point. I mean, Iowa doesn't change coaches very often in anything. And so it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. And that's going to be a really hard pill to swallow. But I think if, again, Fran McCaffrey can't survive another season like they just had with that little of interest and that little of success.
Yeah, but like you said, like it's going to be a hard reality after Fran McCaffrey, whether he is asked to leave by Beth Getz or he retires, right? I think people are going to find a hard reality that, hey, the men's basketball program doesn't have a lot of NIL money flowing into it. Therefore, we're not going to have our choice of coaches. We're going to have to take a chance on somebody, some no-name coach who we hope hits. And
it's not a historically great program, might not even be a historically good program, right? I mean, it's been 25 years since the Sweet 16. They haven't won a Big Ten outright, regular season championship since the 70s. It's a league that's getting harder and harder, right? Like you're bringing in other good basketball schools. There's a very real possibility for Iowa to be a bottom feeder in the Big Ten in men's basketball if they don't make the right hire. And if, as you said, NIL money doesn't come up, maybe we'll grow the greatest men's college basketball player of all time, in our own backyard and hope he comes and has a Caitlin Clark effect on the, and then for some reason doesn't go to the NBA after 1 year. I guess we can hang our hat on that. It worked for women's basketball, but I'm not counting on it.
No, I'm not counting on that either. Well, this has been fun. Edie, we love having you on. We hope you come back on the show again sometime. We would love to have you on more often.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
You're sponsoring. So thank you for just volunteering to take the time to do this. You got any last words for us before we close it out and call it a night?
No, I appreciate you guys. This has been a lot of fun. I love talking to Hawkeye sports, and I like talking with people who don't necessarily think the way I do, and hearing different perspectives. So that's always good. I guess hit me up, Andrew at akcmarketing.com if you need any merchandise, and I'm happy to be on board the Three Beards team. I'm excited about this moving forward. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks, AD. Appreciate it.
Thank you to all of our listeners, all of our sponsors. Have a great night. Go Hawks.